Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is Amin Faisal Mohammad here from Muslim CEO, and this is a new, yet unnamed podcast or show that we'll be doing, inshaAllah. Today, the basic idea is that we're going to be talking about the happenings in the kind of what it's like to be in marketing, being Muslim, stuff like that. But also we're going to kind of flex some of our skills, take on some marketing challenges, which I think will be, entertaining and kind of educational at the same time. So if you're, into a business, like you're running a business, you're starting a business, or you're just kind of interested in this kind of space, then definitely tune in. We'll probably be doing this every 2 weeks or so. So yeah, I'm excited to get this going. It's going to be very unlike the other show that we do. It's much less formal. It's not an interview. It's just three partners. These are three of us who started Muslim CEO, just three of us kind of kicking it and talking about, stuff that really we're kind of interested in anyway, right? So the topic for today, or maybe we should first introduce ourselves a bit. So I'm Amin. Like I said, I'm one of the co-founders of Muslim CEO. My background is pretty much marketing through and through. I've done too many degrees that I would rather not mention them. So now, alhamdulillah, we've been together, working together in one form or another, probably for 3 and a bit years. So yeah, that's me. Do you want to go next, Mohammed, just because you're next to me?
Yep. Assalamu alaikum. So the other way. I'm Mohammad, and I'm the CEO and also a co-founder of Muslim CEO. So I have been involved in the Muslim space for about 15 to 17 years, something like that. So marketing is like a huge passion for me, just like the rest of those guys. And I'm going to point you to Faisal next.
So, Assalamu alaikum. So I'm Faisal. I've got a slightly different background to everyone in the sense that I've got maybe 10, 12 years in the corporate world. Initially, law by sort of academics, but then mostly in procurement buying for sort of retailers and stuff. And then I've been in kind of entrepreneurship for probably about 8 or 9 years across different sort of startups and my kind of passions in marketing are predominantly things like sort of brand strategy, content. I love all the creative aspects of it. So I love coming out with random wacky ideas and then these guys ignoring them.
Serial entrepreneur, yeah, that's what you could start stuff and not finish them, basically. Yeah, that's the creative side.
That's where you guys come in. I can start them and get them going, and you guys finish it off.
Inshallah. So for this episode, we decided to start it off with something that really we're not planning on doing a ton of episodes like this, where it's like we're just talking about a topic. What we hope to do is like these kind of marketing challenges, but we'll mix it up, inshallah. Today, we want to talk about, we're Muslims. We often serve Muslims when it comes to clients, when it comes to our students. They're often Muslims, and they're selling to Muslims, right? So we wanted to cover the topic of the Muslim market, right? So, I mean, firstly, let's kick it off with what is the Muslim market?
Go on, Faisal.
Wow.
Oh, okay. So yeah, no. Okay. It's okay.
Just interrupt.
Okay, fine. Okay. We'll just be very formal.
You got your flipping suit jacket on, bro.
This is casual, bro. This is like how about that's our role, as you know. Okay, so the Muslim market is, I guess it comes down to from like. We have the Islamic economy as a kind of macro level, don't we? Actually, you know what? Okay, if you guys will go into it, and then I'll come.
Okay, I wasn't thinking of Islamic economy being like one thing, and then Muslim market being another. I just thought it's the same thing. Is it not?
Yeah, I think for me, like we've got to remember where we are in the world and what we're talking about, because obviously, when we're talking about Muslim market, we're actually talking about it from a Western perspective. Because if you live in a Muslim country, the whole country is Muslim, right? In that sense. So in a way, I think when we talk about Muslim market and a lot of the people that we interact with, we're talking about in the Western world, what are Muslims like when it comes to buying and selling and the market as a whole. And the fact that I think in these countries we're a minority, I think that's kind of changed the game a little bit in that sense, because, in a normal country where it's Muslim, whether it's the UAE or Pakistan or somewhere, you'll see that they just There's a huge consumer group. They all have different habits based upon their demographics. But whereas in the West, we are like a portion of the total population. And from that, we have certain behaviors, certain demographics. So for example, right now, every single Muslim in the Western world has some connotation of Ramadan right now, right? Because of the fact that they're here. Whereas in Pakistan, literally almost everyone has that connotation. So within the Western world, I think we have a market of people who identify themselves as Muslim. I think the scope for how they identify themselves is very, very wide. So we have people who are very, very practicing, very, very, devout, and Islam is everything for them. And then on the other side of the scale, we have people who maybe just because of their name, they're kind of Muslim, but they still identify with Islam and they still see that as like an identity, like people would see like a cultural identity. So I think like that's like the overall thing in the Western world.
It's interesting. Go on. Sorry, one thing
it probably depends. It probably depends like what the Muslim market is, right? Because I think that in the UK, for example, there's elements of like you said, bro, just because your name is Muslim and you're South Asian, you'll become part of the Muslim market, right? In the sense where, okay, imagine like I'm going to pitch Tesco to get my samosas put in the store. I'm going to say, well, the market is this size. I won't be counting like how many prayers does this guy pray. I'll be counting, is this guy South Asian pretty much, So there's that element. Where in the non-Western world, I think it comes in what plays a big role is maybe more like the religiosity. So for example, in banking, you maybe the average person is not too interested in the Islamic finance side of things, the Islamic banking side of things. Whereas everyone in the Muslim world pretty much wants the halal meat, right? So basically what I'm saying is there's different ways you can define it.
I think this is why when you said, oh, what is the Muslim market? It's such a wide sort of spectrum and scope. Like I mean, Mohammed sort of defined it as our Muslim market in the West. I mean, to be honest, I wouldn't say disagree with it, but for me, the Muslim market is, look, there's 1.8 billion Muslims, of which let's say 2/3 of them are of that age of spending and stuff. So for me, that constitutes the Muslim market, no matter where you are. Because again, they're going to have obviously it does vary country by country or region by region in terms of their kind of what they can afford and how you serve them, etc. But there's certain global certain products that actually, no matter where you are, they'll benefit from.
And it's basically sorry, I cut you off. Go on.
That's all right. No, go on.
Yeah, it's basically the population of Muslims in the West plus the population of all the Muslim countries, pretty much. So basically, that's what is that, bro? Is that actually 1.8 billion? Because I always feel like these numbers are inflated. Like, is there really 1.8 billion Muslims?
Yeah, there's because isn't the total like 8 billion? Obviously, the figures that it always goes from like 1.5, 1.6. But obviously, we have to, population's growing and growing and growing. So the latest reports and figures and stuff that I've read all say kind of 1.8.
I think the other thing that's really changed the market is actually the internet in terms of the access. Because in the old days, we'll be like, okay, there's 1.2 billion Muslims. So what? Like, we live in the UK. That doesn't mean anything. Like, we're not going to advertise to them on the TV channels. We won't be able to connect with the Muslims in Malaysia. But now, like, over these last 15, 20 years, the way the internet has come, the way that the most poorest people on earth have access to mobile phones, suddenly it does become that huge market. And Fessa, we talked a lot about this with that book that we read called Abundance, which is a really, really great book. And it talks about the bottom billion, which is like the lowest income people, the poorest people in the world, having access to things like this, which then allows them to do so many other things, So I think with that in mind, like, you could have something like we speak to a lot of brothers and sisters who are trying to do things like Quran apps, right? So a Quran app, you could see that would be viable for people of so many different countries, right? Now, obviously, even those that are doing Quran apps, they will prioritize certain parts of the Muslim industry. So, for example, the fact that you're doing an English app, that means that you're focusing on, obviously, English speaking Muslims. And then, obviously, slowly, you'll add more languages, and then you might add Turkish, and you might add Malay, and all these other things. And then suddenly it kind of becomes wider. And I think this is the other thing, that why do we talk about the Muslim market? Because we're trying to identify a type of consumer. Why are we trying to identify a type of consumer or type of market? Because the better we know this person, the better we can serve this person. So I think that if we just leave it at this big thing that it's 1.8 billion, we're going to weaken our messaging, we're going to weaken our offering. So it's about having that holistic view and then kind of bringing it in to funnel it to something a lot more specific that we can actually make use of it.
Yeah, but I think I 100% agree, and I think that whenever if you're going out with a product or service, if you say, oh yeah, my product serves all 1.8 billion, that it's unlikely that that it's going to be the case, and it's not not going to be that credible. But I think to start off this kind of dialogue, it's important to understand the macro level, and so what are the trends in that kind of macro level. So first of all, we know that the Muslim market is basically much younger than the rest of the world. That's one. So that's one trend that we already know. Like, I think the median age in the Muslim world is 23 or 24, depending on which report you read. And then in the rest of the world, it's between 28 and 32. So straight away, that, okay, right, we're dealing with a younger and most likely tech savvy consumer.
But also, firstly, because I know you've done a lot of research into this, right? And so, like, it's good to bring up all these kind of points that you're saying, because I know there's a few of those big points. But just to make us aware of what that actually means, it means not only do we have a much younger population, but it means, like, in the Western world, where you have people who are aging, who can't work, who are relying on pensions, and who are of this kind of age, the problems that it brings, and sickness, and all this kind of stuff. Like, the Muslim world is much better off in that sense,
Yeah, 100%. Because it means that what's going to happen is that as we get forward, as we go forward in time, that's the Muslim as the Muslim market matures and the Western world kind of declines. You're going to get a point where
you see a golden age, bro. Golden age.
Exactly. Yeah, that's it. inshallah. So that's kind of the first thing. One of the other thing I found really, really interesting when looking into this is that the figure is like 75% of the kind of Muslims globally actually have English as a first or second language, which for me was really interesting, because it's like, sometimes we think, oh yeah, if I want to serve everyone in the world, I need to have this language and this language. I want Arabic to serve. But actually, if that's really the case, and this is all from Pew and all these kind of big research organizations, that means that from an 80-20 perspective, you can actually focus purely on English to start off with, and you can serve a huge part. And again, just from that kind of model of 80-20, I think it's a good model to apply when you're looking at markets to go into, because even when you look at the top, I think it's the top 10 Muslim countries. So I think Malaysia, Indonesia, the subcontinent, and then the North African countries, they account for like 50% of the entire market.
Yeah.
First
of all, it's interesting what you said about language, right? Because what I've found, that whole thing around English, is that it's actually something not only in the Muslim market, but even in the non-Muslim market. And I'll give you an example. Like, I've been married for, I think, like 12 or 13 years now. And my wife is French. So whenever I go to see my in-laws, a lot of my in-laws are non-Muslim. And like, when I first got married, like, at that level, no one spoke English. So you imagine, I'm going to France, I'm meeting my in-laws, like, no one speaks English. But when I go to France now, like, all my nephews, in-laws, my nieces, all the young ones, they all speak English. And like their level of confidence in English is different, because they're exposed to the music, they're exposed to movies and all these kind of things. Where suddenly, like,
it's English soft power in it.
Yeah, so suddenly English has become like a real part of them, even though the French are actually quite famous for being those guys that say, no, you learn French, we're not going to learn English, type of thing. Yeah. And I think in the Muslim world, we're seeing that same kind of thing. And this is the whole thing around globalization and America and people looking up to the West and everything. But from a language perspective, it does make it great for Muslim businesses and organizations, with the power of English.
100%.
When it comes to like starting a business or focusing on selling to Muslims, I think there still is a very big divide, though, right? Because I was speaking to someone a couple of weeks ago. They have an app, and the app is cheap, right? It's like £6 a month or something, yeah. And even then, it's like selling that to the 100 million Muslims in India, for example, it's not going to be like an attractive price. It's going to seem like way over the top, right?
Of course, yeah.
So for that reason, a lot of people will neglect those markets, like India, which is huge, like Indonesia, which is huge, right? He was still going down the route, but many people, they just kind of, I think they assume that, our pricing is just going to have to change so much when approaching those markets.
This is like an interesting topic because I think back in the days, it was definitely the case, but I think things are really, really changing now. And I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. I spoke to this brother recently. He's like spent a lot of time in the UK, but he's living in Bangladesh. And he was telling me that in Bangladesh, there are people who will pay $50 for a course. Okay. Now, for me, that's like amazing. Why is it amazing? Because we know that all the marketing gurus say, if you want to get really cheap likes and really cheap opt-ins and engage, like go to Bangladesh, go to Pakistan, go to these countries. Why? Because advertising is so cheap there that you can increase everything to a next level. And so I was thinking to him that, there's people in the UK who are selling $50 courses and trying to be profitable over it with marketing to the UK. But if you were paying like 1/20th of that price, and then you could target people, it's very powerful. And then I think also the sheer numbers of these countries make it that there is actually a very viable market for these people, but you have to be targeted. So take Pakistan as an example. Yeah, Pakistan has 240 million people. Okay, so let's say 99% of those people are poor or middle class or whatever, and only 1% is the like super rich. Okay, that gives you 2.4 million people. Okay, now from the 2.4 million people,
that's like more than the population of Qatar or something.
Yeah, exactly. So from those 2.4
the Muslim market in the UK totals 2.4 million.
Exactly. So now if you take that 2.4 million of super rich Muslim, and I'm not talking about rich like UK level, I'm talking like exceedingly by yachts type of rich, right? So that 1% of people, if you then say, well, of those, only 10% are relevant to your market, that's still like 240,000 Muslims who are very, very like ready to buy and like prepared, from that perspective.
So then why don't we target those areas?
No, because I think it's about offering, right? It's about what you offer. And that's why I'm saying to you that there's a difference between a $50 product and a $10,000 marketing offer.
Sure,
right?
yeah.
So
all of these countries have very rich people, no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Every country, like Nigeria, India, Bangladesh, they have tons of very rich people.
And what they also have as well, what they also have is much more, I would say, pain of, let's say if you're selling something about, getting, making money online or something like that. So they're like, okay, a lot of them might have grown up in poverty or seen that around them, or they want that independence. And obviously the work ethic thing is over there as well, which is much, maybe more so than in the West. So, it is something that's definitely possible.
I mean, it might be good to go into a little bit about niches and more specific verticals and stuff, because a lot of people, obviously, this is the foundation level, right? Like people who haven't been into business, who haven't been into marketing, they just see the Muslim market and they think that's it. But there are like verticals, there are more specific niches to kind of go into. And then there's the whole concept of evergreen niches, right? So like for you guys, like what does it mean when we say an evergreen niche or niche?
I don't know what that term means, bro. Evergreen, yani, it's always work. It's not a fad. Is that what I mean?
Yeah.
It just means that it'll always, like you can create products or services within that niche, and it'll always sell basically all year round. It's not seasonal. It's not like here today, gone tomorrow kind of thing.
Okay, so like for example, like Bitcoin wouldn't really be evergreen, right? That kind of thing. Yeah?
Like in the non-Muslim niche, right? In the non-Muslim market, marketers usually say that there's three main niches. One is health, which is everything from skincare to weight loss to confidence and everything.
Quit smoking and stuff, yeah.
So that's health. Then there's wealth. So that's like making money and all of those kind of things. And then the third thing, which is huge as well, is relationships, right? So obviously non-Muslims, they have a different kind of context to ours. So theirs could be about
What's
dating.
The relationships market? Dating,
so
but what else?
It could be dating. Within dating.
Weddings.
And the other thing is within dating, there's like sub niches. So there's things like get your ex back, which is like a huge niche, right? Not that I've looked into anything, but that's like a massive niche.
That's like a deceptive kind of offering. It's not going to work.
Yeah. So you have all of that kind of thing. But then even things like communication can kind of fall into relationships and divorce
weddings
and
as well, right?
marriage.
That's a big
Yeah,
industry.
marriage. So
Yeah.
these
But
are like
all these dating apps, isn't it?
yeah, exactly. So what about Muslims, right? Like what like I mean, if you look at these, you could say that it's very very similar in that sense. So when it comes to like marriage is a huge thing. You've seen people like
Muzmatch
Single
and stuff.
Muslim and Muzmatch do extremely well in the market, right? And you can see new people always kind of entering that market as well. In terms of like wealth, so wealth is a huge thing. I think it's worked. We've seen different people come to the Muslim market, talk about making money online. I think it's done well, but I don't think it's been done so well, or so many people have
There's
done
no
it.
real market leader in that sense.
Yeah, yeah. And then
Except
same.
us.
Yeah, exactly. And then the same with health. I think health is the same. I think what's different, like I mean, there are things we joke about as Muslim marketers, right? We talk about how jinn is one of those topics, right? That is like evergreen. Anytime you talk about jinn, people are interested. Anytime you talk about the Dajjal or the end of times, like Muslims are kind of interested. So I think there are kind of markets and stuff that are like that. But I think it also depends on the maturity of Muslims, right? In terms of the Muslim market, because we kind of have this thing where today in the world, one of the biggest industries is info products, right? So selling information, selling consultancy, all this kind of stuff is absolutely huge. But as Muslims, like, do you guys feel that we're at that stage now where we're like the non-Muslims, where we buy information products freely and you can sell courses and advice, or are we still like very behind?
So I think first of all we have to understand that the West or non-Muslim market, let's say, are maybe 10, 20, maybe even 30 years ahead, right? So in terms of their maturity online, they've been early adopters. Muslims have been quite traditional in that sense, preferring community-based things, etc. It's actually this from our generation, minor means. Yeah, from my generation, kind of downwards, is that people are now embracing online, and they basically, as the generations live in the West, we are doing behavioral patterns, based on what we see and what we've learned around us and how we've been educated, etc. So now, naturally, I think we are sort of catching up, and so initially, maybe 5-10 years ago, when people were first going in, there was no real like Muslim kind of leaders and stuff out there. So we were just looking at information products from the best of the West, kind of things.
Yeah.
Might be Tony Robbins or whoever. As I think we're seeing with this new generation, we have people are now much more strong in their identity. So people have a stronger identity as Muslims, and they're like, you know what, I want to work with Muslims, or I want to get benefit from Muslims. I think we are seeing, but I think that's a group of people. Obviously, that's not everyone.
I think I found one evergreen niche for Muslims, which might not be evergreen for others. That is charities.
Okay.
Right. So charities in the Muslim world have actually, Muslim market have done very, very well. Right. I was talking to Dr. Amjad Saqib, who's the head of Akhuwat, which is an Islamic finance, microfinancing for the poor. And they've like given out like $900 million. That's in a country that's poor like Pakistan, right? And then you've got the Islamic Reliefs of the world, who are like top charities in the West as well. So I think charities as a whole is like a huge, huge market. And it's one of those markets where we are more advanced because we started like 40, 50 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And when I was talking to one of the brothers, Fazl, who's like head of Crescent Rating, he was saying that he found that the Muslim market wasn't actually served, and people weren't really looking at it from a Muslim consumer perspective. But every single day, the Muslims are increasing in number. We're spending more. We're becoming more comfortable in the West and all this kind of stuff. And I think that as time goes on, different aspects are being developed. So, for example, right now, someone like Akmal Salim's just kind of working on Rizq, which is like an alternative banking solution for Muslims, right? So all these kind of things where like there's space there. And I think this is what I really love about the Muslim market, that I feel that it's not developed. So anything you start will usually take a lot more time traction wise, but the potential for you becoming a market leader is huge. It's absolutely huge, right?
And it's quicker than normal,
Yeah, because right now you can see that there's people like when we say in the non-Muslim world, if we said, okay, who is a good personal development guru? Okay, we'll be like, oh yeah, it's Tony Robbins, it's Brian Tracy, it's you know, Jim Rohn, it's like Brendan Burchard, and you got all these people who come to mind, right? If I said to you, like, in the Muslim world, who's like the man for personal development apart from Mohammad Arshad, what would you guys say?
I'd say Mohammad Arshad as
Yeah,
well.
but who else? Like,
Yeah.
maybe we'd say Sheikh Mohammed Sharif, for example. He's like into that personal development type of thing. But
Yeah,
even
in
then,
the
it's not like
Western world,
clear cut, right? So for someone to come in and be very specific and say, look, I do personal development for Muslims, right? And just keep honing that in, like within a year or two, you can see yourself getting to the front. And if you think about it, guys, like for us, like, you know, a lot of our work was behind the scenes before with the agency. We were doing work for clients and all this kind of stuff. It's only in the last year or so that Muslim CEOs kind of come to the front and said, look, this is what we do. And from that, we've seen so much interest, so many people kind of getting involved, and people starting to see us now as like a leader when it comes to marketing. And how's that? That's happened so quick. But if we had like 100 different Muslims who were playing that role already, it would be very difficult. So I think there's so much opportunity there.
Yeah. Okay. What it is that Muslims are starved for these kind of things. Like, you know how I think you said it before in the past that Muslims love celebrities or
personalities.
Personalities and stuff. Yeah, that's right. And stuff. And so when there's someone who's front and center and showing the way, and you know, followers, you know, we're dying for kind of heroes and stuff in that sense. So, so with. If and I took you, you mentioned Akbar Salim, but I'm just talking about like fintech and stuff in general. Like, this has been a pain since day one for Muslims. Oh God, riba and all that kind of stuff. It's so painful, and as yet, no one has come because they've not had the capital of, they don't have the vision, or I don't know what it is. They've not solved this problem for Muslims. As soon as someone can do it at the level of, obviously Monzo and Starling, all these guys have come in. They've done better solutions, but again, it's not Muslim focused. But as soon as now, one's that led the way, and I don't know which one came first. You've seen a lot of 3 or 4 have jumped on because of the initial traction and interest. So,
and if you think about it,
you mentioned Rizq, then Kestrel's there's Insha, there's like 4 or 5 different ones that have come out all at the same time, because that desperation or that desire for it.
If you think about it, bro, the gap you talked about, 20-30 year gap, right? That gap now is becoming smaller and smaller in a quicker amount of time, right? The catch up is accelerated, and it's not just between the Muslim and non-Muslim world. It's between the, you know, less developed and then the developed world. That gap is being, you know, made smaller and smaller quicker, right? So for example, how old is Monzo, for example? 5 years old?
Yeah, probably that.
5 years old.
It is 5 years old. Yeah.
So now, like, Rizq is coming out, so that gap is only 5 years there. You get it? And maybe TransferWise, Revolut, like, these are like 5 years or younger, maybe even. And they have hundreds of millions of capital behind them. So that just shows that in some areas, Muslims will be only a few years behind. And I hope that means, inshallah, that eventually we will actually become the leaders and pioneers in certain areas.
I think that's a really good point. I mean, because if you think about when the first charity was started in the UK, and then maybe our next charity was like 80 years later, 100 years later, and that gap really going down. I think like now we have a situation where someone like Akmal, if you take a look at him, like he has like so much experience in creating brands and all this stuff. So as we have Muslim professionals who are doing real branding, real marketing, doing all these kind of things and being exposed to it, then it's much quicker because they have just as good a chance as anyone else. But one thing I just wanted to say, bro, is really important. Anyone watching this, I think the advice I would give them is to think about Akmal and Akhuwat. What Akmal said when I asked him that question, like, how come no one's come up with the idea? He said, what's been happening is that Muslims have been looking at the current finance industry and been going, okay, this is how they do finance. We'll do a Muslim version of that. But he said, what we're doing is we're wiping the slate clean. We are coming blank canvas. Imagine banking did not exist. How would we do it as Muslims? Okay, so that's like a completely different mindset,
it's a paradigm
shift in the way that you're thinking, right?
Yeah, that's leadership.
That's leadership. So one thing I think is really important. Anyone watching this who's interested in the Muslim market, do not fall into the trap that seeing, oh, there's Tony Robbins, yeah. Okay, he does personal development. Let me just add inshaAllah, yeah. So instead of click here, let me just add click here, inshaAllah, and then suddenly like it's all fine, right? It's not. It's about us actually coming from that paradigm where we are blank canvas. That's the first thing. Second thing I would say is akhuwat. Like these guys, this guy, bro, he made $100 into $900 million in a country like Pakistan, right? And everything he's done, bro, is based on the Sunnah. The whole meaning, akhuwat, is about brotherhood between the Ansar and the Muhajirun, and the fact that they helped each other. And his whole vision is the rich people of this world helping the poor people of this world to basically get to that stable position. And then they've gone riba free, and like they've been very strict on riba. Then they use masajid when they're giving the money out, and then they got 99% rate of return. So what I'm saying is that fundamentally, when we're thinking about solutions as Muslims, especially for the Muslim market, we should be coming from a different paradigm. We should be coming from a clean slate kind of design perspective, and then we should be using our identity as Muslims, and of course the Sunnah, because there's so much barakah and wisdom in the Sunnah, in our deen, and we should be taking that stuff and putting 100%. That stuff into our products and services.
Absolutely. I mean, it reminds me of, I mean, even when we spoke to the brothers at Andalus, they were like, look, there's a fundamental problem with the whole Silicon Valley funding and nothing like that for Muslims. And obviously Andalus was the Silicon Valley of its day. We need to reimagine the entire sort of like the whole funding model and stuff. Because I think all you know, we've talked about how great the Muslim market is and this and that. But we haven't talked about some of the challenges. And I think that is probably one of the biggest challenges that there is. That not most of the VCs, most of the people with deep pockets to fund some of these big ventures are obviously non-Muslims. So they don't get the potential. They're not really in it. They don't have that vested interest. But I mean, it is true. I think it is true.
If you look at I think the biggest shareholder in Tesla, who is that?
Saudi.
You know,
but again, what you're thinking is that Saudi equals sort of Muslim in that sense. I'm not
but they are Muslims. That's
what I'm saying. What I'm talking about is more.
So what you're saying is they're not Muslim, right?
No, he's not saying. They're hating on the Saudis. No, I think what Faisal's saying is that basically, and I think this is very, very common, that everyone in the world right now does not want to risk their money in risky businesses. Right? Yeah, it's not about Muslim, non-Muslim. If a non-Muslim sees an opportunity where they believe, look, we can make some real cash on this, they will invest. But would
Saudi invest in Muslim? Actually, they probably would.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Because of their understanding of the market and the need, it might be lower. But something like Muzmatch, right? People look at it like, if I was a non-Muslim investor, you'd be like, okay, this is relationships. Dating has done very, very well. This is like the halal version of it. I can see this doing really well. Islamic finance, like the non-Muslims are hugely involved in Islamic finance, right? All of our stuff is underpinned by non-Muslim banks and stuff anyway. So fundamentally, I think what it is that their risk tolerance is much higher when it comes to Muslim projects, right? And then also there is, of course, what you said, bro, like there's a lack of understanding. For me to go to a Muslim and non-Muslim and try and explain that as a non-Arab speaker, how important it is for me to kind of understand Arabic, it's very difficult for them to kind of comprehend that, right? Yeah. But I think that the point is that there's enough capital in the Muslim world for them to actually fund it. And
there is, But what needs to change is just the mindset and the attitude and like education, I suppose, and a few risks being taken. That's all.
Yeah, 100%. But I think that's what I'm saying, that if you actually look at behaviors of sort of investors and things like that, it's at the moment anyway, it's not conducive to them backing like Muslim brands and that only focus on Muslims. That's the thing. Like, you know, Muslim is obviously an exception, I'd say, and obviously because of the attraction, you know, the numbers are kind of obviously they basically things are driven by economy, isn't it, and by data. And sometimes I guess something what I'm talking about is like the whole I guess ideology, or where, you know, Muslims investing in Muslim projects because of the grand vision of the economy strengthening long term. And so I think when you look at a prime example actually is, we talk about Rizq and all these guys, but there's actually one that beat them all to the punch a few years ago called Ummah Finance. Have you heard of them?
No.
Okay, so Ummah Finance they're about 2018. but they actually got funding. But one I'm not sure if it's a conditional funding or whatever, but they had to rebrand and rename themselves to Money Mint. So and instead of being Islamic and other, it's actually an ethical bank.
Is that because the investor was, concerned about the risks and it might not work?
Perhaps, yeah. I remember reading press releases on it and stuff at the time, and so it coincided with the fact that so obviously I've never spoken to them. I don't really know the full background and detail, but the fact of it is, like, just a year later, all of these other banks are sort of now coming into place, and so again, it's like, look, I spoke to a brother recently from the app Minted. So Minted are like again a fintech who are trying to make gold accessible to everyone, and so it's really, really great concept, really great idea. And again, he's identified Muslims as a market who'd be very, very interested because of the hadith and all that kind of stuff. But the way he's branded it is not specifically at Muslims, but it doesn't discount Muslims either. So and so there's no right or wrong answer. This is my point.
Would that be in Muslim market or not? I guess he would say that's one of his target markets.
I mean, it was interesting. It was like that. He had two very clear markets, and Muslims could be fit in either one of them, but it wasn't specifically, we're targeting Muslims. Does that make sense? So it was like, we've got the young professional, we've got such and such, and Muslims make up those, but it's not, we're targeting them.
I think one thing we should definitely touch upon as we're talking about the Muslim market is like the actual maturity of the individuals within the market, right? True, because, like, sometimes, like, I'll give you an example. Someone will see me, let's say, on a website selling something, right? Just the fact that I have this this long beard, right? For them, it's a lot of people. It's like, okay, this guy's selling. His normal terminology is things like inshaAllah and alhamdulillah, and by that connotation, he's now using Islam to sell, right? So, like, how does someone kind of like? First of all, what do you guys think about that kind of stuff? Like, should it be that we very completely remove our deen from any sort of communication when we're in business? Should it be within us? How does it all work? And, like, what's the whole state of selling in the Muslim market?
So for me, is that, look, let's go back in history, because we don't often do that. Let's go back in history. Muslims, have they always traded or not? Yes, they have. And basically, we've got a reputation, we've got a heritage of trading with one another and relationships. Like they say, half the deen is in muamalat, transactions, right? So if it's such a big part of who we are, and like we've got almost like a blueprint of how we're supposed to do it in Islam, etc., then online is this the marketplace of today? Like you imagine back today in the markets and stuff, when they spoke to each other, Assalamu alaikum, how you? It would have been done very, like, properly with Islamic values and stuff. So why shouldn't we do that today? I don't understand why it's an issue. Does that make sense?
I think it might be a couple of reasons. Yeah, one is, and if you look at the average Muslim, it depends where you are, okay? But the average Muslim, they say Salaam alaikum wa alaikum salam, okay? They might say inshaAllah. But being in that mindset of, like, my whole life is for Allah and this kind of stuff, maybe that's not so common, right? Maybe, Which means that when they see somebody selling something and they're using the language of Islam, they might assume that because in their daily life, they're not so open and always mentioning these things, they might assume that, oh, you're only bringing it up because you want to persuade me. Maybe that's it. So maybe it says something about where we are, religion-wise, in terms of how much religion impacts our life. Because if we're like, what we strive for, like, our day is scheduled around the salah and everything we say is alhamdulillah this, and we know the hadith and we know the rules for this and that, then when we see you say Assalamu alaikum, do you want to buy this from me, inshaAllah, and may Allah put barakah in it and all that, it'll be more normal and you wouldn't be skeptical. But because maybe it's not that common, maybe that's the thing. That could be a factor.
I think also what it is that selling generally in different cultures is seen differently, right? So if you think about something like the Americans, right? The Americans are actually very comfortable with people selling, right?
Being
Generally,
sold
like,
to.
yeah, being sold to, like, they're very normal. Business is huge over there. It's very different. In Britain, even like
Tremendous business over there.
even even in Britain, like, I think we're a little bit less than the Americans, right? Where we're
Definitely.
like, you know, we're
They're
a bit
like,
more
oh, don't be
reserved.
pushy.
Yeah, don't be pushy, all this kind of stuff, right? And then the Muslim market's even lower than that. It's like, what? You're actually selling something. Like, brother, why don't you do this for the sake of Allah? Just say Bismillah and then live off that, right? Like, why would you charge for it? So I think there's that whole connotation of, like, I mean, a lot of our culture as well is about giving, right? Alhamdulillah, we're very lucky as Muslims that we have that culture. I remember when my dad had his own shop and the kind of things he was doing, you know, he was always giving people like things for free and this and that. He would just buy stuff and give people stuff. And like, this whole notion of giving stuff for free and having discounts and all this, this is, I think, a bit of an Asian thing as well. Maybe it's a wider Muslim thing as well. But fundamentally, I think a lot of Muslims are not comfortable with other people selling to them. And some of it has to do with the fact that if you sell me something which is inferior, which is a scam, then obviously I'm not going to like it. I don't want to buy it, right? But the point is, like, someone was saying the other day, I think one of the speakers, they were saying that if you truly believe in your product, like, let's say you have a real product that helps Muslims with something, right? Then you have a moral obligation to sell that. You have to, because if it solves, like the Prophet ﷺ said, that it's like a hadith, I'm paraphrasing, that someone who comes to the help of another Muslim and aids him, Allah will help them, right? So fundamentally, if you have something that can help other Muslims and benefit them and can make them better and help them with their problems, then you have to have that thing in you where I have to sell this and I have to go out there. And obviously money is one of those things where you have to live. You cannot have your everyday thing just supplied by Bismillah, right? You have to live. So I think it's that whole connotation of what sales actually is, what selling is, and having real value. Because obviously we've seen different people come into the markets, they scam people, there's issues. And because of that, people get like, oh, okay, now you paint you by the same brush, right?
Yeah. But I think we can't ignore the fact that there have been sort of charlatans, and at the end of the day, there are always people looking to make a quick buck and this and that. It's about, and so,
But that's not a Muslim issue. That is
it's a general worldly issue.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Basically, internet making business so easy to begin, very low barrier to entry.
Yeah.
But like then on the other side, there are, I think, the players that, like, we kind of focus because maybe it's our thing, like internet marketing and stuff like that. But there is a whole world of Islamic banks, for example, in the Muslim world, like very well established. Then Islamic is right there in the name. The offerings is, supposed to be, based on Islamic values and stuff. So that's like a very big thing. At the same time, yeah, and at least in the UAE, what I see is it's not the majority of Muslims that maybe are going to those Islamic banks, right? So that's like goes back to what we're saying, is that there are levels to Muslim market, right? There are different areas where people want to take the Islamic side of things more seriously or less seriously,
Yeah. Do you remember there's one of these I think when we're doing it for a client, we did like this like research around, again, Muslim demographic and stuff, and we split it into basically the two types. There's the futurists and then the traditionalists. I don't know if you remember that. Yeah. And so you have the futurists basically, and I think we're getting more and more of this new generation are the futurists. So there's basically these guys are sort of Gen Y, Gen Z. They're basically, faith and identity is very big for them. They're more well-traveled or globalized than anyone and stuff. And so they're more like looking for Muslim type products. They're more happy with technology, and but also they're more informed. So I think these guys, because they're more informed, they're like, okay, they might not want to go to an Islamic bank, but because they're not really the right type, and so we want to have a proper Muslim bank or whatever. So those guys are a bit more like that. And you know, with this particular demographic, they're not really they're not interested in just sticking to the status quo. They're all about transparency and accountability. They're not unafraid to call people out if they need to. So that's why they're quite demanding, but they're very lucrative because they're affluent. They all got good jobs, they're educated and stuff. So that's this kind of. And then they have the traditionalists who are a bit more old school, sort of like maybe 40 plus and stuff, who. Like they're like maybe the guys who just want are doing things a bit more that kind of the old school way. They want more safety and stuff like that. So maybe so I think that the world is going towards, especially the internet world anyway, is going more towards these kind of futurists and being able to serve these guys. And that's why it takes me back to this whole conversation we were having about verticals. So although Mohammed was talking about evergreen niches and stuff, I mean, like there's really like 7 or 8 key verticals established, or identified. Obviously, one is finance, which we've talked a lot about, fintech and stuff. Then you have the obviously modest fashion. You have obviously massive industry, yeah. Then you got halal, like lifestyle and stuff. So that covers entertainment. It covers like Muslim and people like that. You have what's it called? Halal cosmetics being one. Obviously, food being another. Tourism being another, and education. So there, I would say that the main key verticals that all are probably billion dollar, if not $1 trillion. Obviously, finance is probably $1 trillion industry, but the others are certainly.
And I think this is a good point, because I like the way you've kind of identified these, because a lot of the people that we speak to who are trying to build businesses, it's always one of these kind of areas. And like you said, finance is kind of one of those big ones. There's lots of money there. It's kind of established and it's getting more established. The other big one, like you said, is like fashion, cosmetics, all these kind of things. They're now going to this whole kind of next level. It's like even, first, I think you were telling me that one of our clients who's working with us on the program actually got partnered up with Ferrari, right? Like with the kind of stuff that they're doing. So like you can see like major brands like Ferrari now dealing with a Muslim brand and kind of working on that. So I think that fundamentally, like this.
The thing is though, bro, I think it wasn't a Muslim brand. Maybe that's what's important to remember here is, her brand is, it's based in the UK, I believe, and it's got an Arab flavor to it.
Yes.
Right.
But one crucial thing that they did say is that we were looking for something for our Muslim clients. It was actually the brief.
Really?
So that was actually why they chose to go.
Oh, for Ramadan, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was for Ramadan. So exactly. So again, now, people are understanding that. Okay, well, Ferrari, I guess they're now at that stage where they've got a lot of buyers or customers who are Muslim. Maybe that wasn't the case 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah. But one thing I wanted to do, like obviously we said that most of these episodes we're going to do in the future, inshallah, they're going to be very concrete. They're going to be there to help people. And today's discussion was more around giving a holistic view of the market. So just to kind of get a bit more specific and concrete for the last part, I just wanted to ask you guys, like, if there's a Muslim who's watching this right now, and they're basically going through this kind of mindset where I want to do something for Muslims, I want to start something, I don't know where I want to focus. I always tell people, like, go check out the training at muslimceo.com, because that will give you a great understanding of marketing. I love that training, right? But like, if they're watching this now and they're questioning, a lot of people, this is a question on people's mind. Is the Muslim market right? Is it big enough? Is it this? Is it that? So if they have a solution they want to do for the Muslim market, like, what's your advice for kind of getting more solid on the market, the type of people that you're serving and getting into the niches, and like, what kind of advice do you guys have for that?
I might be the wrong guy to ask, because I think most of the time I end up trying to, basically I end up in the Muslim market, selling to the Muslim market because I'm Muslim and I love Muslims, not for business reasons. When I think of like obviously this is limited to ideas I've had and opportunities I've had, but usually the bigger opportunities and the lucrative ones, it hasn't necessarily been selling to Muslims. So for that, if you business first, I mean, obviously starting a business is about what you want, right? So I like working with Muslims, right? I'm more comfortable with that. So that's part of it. But then if you want to really, really prioritize money, then it's not about, it's Muslim market or non-Muslim market. It's just about, do I have a great idea to solve a big problem? And yeah, if you're Muslim, you might end up identifying those problems that Muslims are facing. But I think it's just not about forcing it. Like I've said,
if that's the definition of it, then that basically we're saying businesses are built around value. The way you actually get value or give value is by solving problems, right?
Yeah.
So then by no doubt that there will be problems that Muslims face which are specific to Muslims, and so therefore,
exactly.
I was going to get to that.
Go on.
because like I was saying, in the UAE, I don't know, 70-80% of the population is Muslim probably. And what are the banks that are most popular? They're not the Islamic banks, right? And what that means is that there wasn't that huge problem for people that they once solved with an Islamic bank. You get it? So that's why I'm saying I would love Yani to do, maybe I wouldn't love to do bank, but let's say, I think it's cool, yeah, to do a bank, to do a, a Muslim Islamic focused challenger bank. I just think, unfortunately, this is where just Muslims, inshallah, will improve, is that Muslims need to have a problem where it's like, I hate riba and I hate this, these evil things, these bad things, and I want to avoid them. But I just feel like in many markets, the number of people who are hungry and dying for a solution to that, it's not always there. I'm not saying it's not there, but it's not always there. But people who are religious, perhaps, and they have the problem, they might do that usual thing where you assume other people have that same problem. Yeah. So that's why I say I would avoid that kind of thinking where it's like, yeah, everyone's religious, everyone hates the riba and wants to avoid it. Now, unfortunately, it's not always like that.
I'd even say it's probably like 20 to 30% of the overall market that probably identifies as religious or super religious and stuff. So, but one thing I just want to add is that, when you look at problems, obviously we also have that thing, isn't it? Like you either have a painkiller or you have a vitamin. And the vitamins that they're nice to have, and painkillers that are, it's really, I've got a splitting headache, I need something to take it away. And for example, halal food has always done well no matter where you go in any country, because the Quran says I must eat, halal, all that kind of stuff, and you go down that route. What do you call it? It is getting to that stage where people are getting that awareness of things like riba and stuff like that. But you're right. For some reason, and this is the state of the ummah, as you said, it's not quite there, and maybe inshallah that'll get there. But modest fashion is another reason. So again, looking at, even when you're looking at down these verticals, there's certain things that exist because, right, we have to have an alternative. We can't. The normal Western shops aren't selling what we need in our fashion, or we're sending kids to school and they're not learning the Islamic principles and stuff that they need to, so hence there needs to be an alternative. So I think that's one way of looking at it. The next thing I was going to say was, it's all to do with, is your focus on my problem, like this problem, like I'll give you an example. So, so there's people out there who say, I want to do the Muslim version of Amazon, right? Or I want to do the Muslim version of Netflix or something, right? The thing is that, so with something like Amazon, Muslims, there's nothing I would say haram about what Amazon do. So in terms of the Muslims benefit from it, that kind of stuff. So is there a need for it? Is it a painkiller? It's probably not. It's a vitamin. But as long as you understand that, there's no harm. You can still go ahead and do it. And it's a marketplace for Muslims to sell it to each other. That's great.
It's going to be difficult for sure, though.
But of course it will be difficult, because you're competing with, obviously, someone as big as that and deep pockets as that and ruthless as that.
Jay Bezos.
Yeah. But also, the fact that it's that really painful demand probably isn't there for something like that. But it would be in the other way.
Yeah. And I was going to add as well, because I don't want to be like I don't know if I sounded negative or not, but you know what it is? I was thinking about TransferWise, okay? One of my favorite companies, really good offering and everything. And if you think of TransferWise, people like me who, often have been sending money to different countries and exchanging currencies. We got the idea that it's expensive to send the money. Like, we kind of felt that. But what TransferWise did is they really educated the customer on how much you're really getting ripped off, and that created a pain. Okay.
So go on, finish off.
Yeah, that created a pain. And when that so through education, they created pain, and then they solved that pain, right? So this is an avenue where a Muslim might want to go down, where they're like, okay, did you know that just how alcohol is really bad or whatever, and you must, haram meat is really bad. riba's even worse, or
Yeah.
whatever is really even worse. But what that just requires is, I think, a lot of financial backing and
Yeah.
a more of a long-term view, where it's like,
100%.
look, I'm going to
100%.
spend 3 years educating this market, and then eventually I'll create the demand myself. That's
And
just expensive and it takes time, but there's many companies do that.
this is exactly what I was going to say to you guys, is that if you look at the other industries, they are maturing. That's why they feel like, oh, there's already a market there. But it wasn't always like this, right?
Yeah.
So if you look at someone like Tony Robbins, for example, why is Tony Robbins like so highly regarded in the Muslim world? Why is he ahead of the curve? Because he was the first one to really come to the market and educate them that, look, your life doesn't need to be this way. There are things, and success leaves clues, and there's changes you can make. And he went crazy with the infomercials and educating them that your life can be different and this can happen and this. And then because of that, then he became obviously the pioneer in it. And then he created a kind of a whole industry with that, right? Even though personal development has been there since Islam, like, you know, it's all about developing yourselves and stuff. But to bring it to the forefront, he's done that. And I think this is something like what we tried to do in IERA, right? Like in IERA, when we first started, we were looking at dawah, and we were saying, look, dawah is that thing where it's practicing religious Muslims. And of those practicing religious Muslims, most of them don't do dawah. There's a small percentage, because most practicing Muslims are, I'll pray my salah, I'll give my zakah, I'm a good Muslim, done, right? And then only a tiny percentage of those people would be like, okay, let's go give dawah. Forget young people giving dawah, and just little tiny percentage. So what we did is we kind of, I remember I read this book called Influencer, right? And it basically talked about how you influence a society to change. And within it, they were talking about personal change, group change, societal change, structural change. And I went into IRA, I spoke to the brothers, and we drew this whole map up of how you get people to change in terms of their views of something. And it comes down to like motivation and ability. Like, are they motivated to do dawah? And then do they have the ability? So our whole approach was about giving them the motivation, giving them the knowledge, and then getting them to take action. Motivation, knowledge, and action, right? But of course, like you said, this is a long-term approach, because we're sitting here saying on day one, how do we make dawah cool? How do we make it something that people want to do? And now, alhamdulillah, like when you fast forward like 10, 15 years since IRA has kind of been around, like I have non-practicing, like completely non-practicing family Muslims who do haram, like next level stuff. And those guys are saying to me, oh, did you see what happened in Hyde Park Dawah? Right? So it's like the shift has taken place where today dawah is seen as something cool, something that young people do, some people that are confident they do it, and you know, people want to get involved in it and stuff. And that shift has happened because someone took the time and said, right guys, like this is something that we care about and we need to do. And I think that if Muslims are truly passionate about a market and an area, and they understand it and they do it, we have enough Muslims that need that kind of help, and we can definitely go out there and make a difference.
Yeah, I think there's two more key things I want to say. First thing, as you know, I've always sort of thought myself as a bit of an early adopter. I see a lot of trends, and one of the things we have to acknowledge is that the Muslim market is growing exponentially. It's here to stay, and it's becoming more and more influential by the day. How do we know this? Because when, like I said, 3, 4, 5 years ago, we saw, I think H&M had a model, a hijabi model in their advertising campaign. And slowly but surely, you're starting to see all the big brands actually either have hijabis or overtly Muslim. I mean, Amazon even had someone in their advertising as Muslim. Or they're starting to cater. You go to Asda or you go to Tesco, they've got Ramadan kind of aisles and stuff. So we're starting to see it, like what people are, they're understanding that, okay, first of all, Ramadan is like a $1 billion season. It's like Christmas, you know, we need to, and obviously their decisions are economically driven, right? Obviously for us, it might be economically driven as a secondary thing. And primary might be, okay, we want to serve the Ummah, we want them to do great and stuff. And for us, the economic side is a byproduct. But the point of it is that we have to acknowledge that it's a big beast, and it's here to stay, and it's going to only grow. And so it's like, if you want a piece of it, how do you do it? So the thing I'd say at that point is, what people want. Yes, they do want to support and this and that, but really what they want more than anything is amazing customer experience, amazing product. And sometimes that's actually where Muslims are lacking. Muslims are willing to go to Muslims, but then they've got a secondary product or not as impressive product, and they think, oh, okay, well, yes, yeah, I would love to have supported, but it's not. I'm not going to do myself a disservice. And so if you want to really serve them, serve it with ihsan. Again, according to our principles, do it the best possible way you can, right? And look at what sort of is out there already and improve on it. That's how you're really adding value. That's how you're really doing service.
That's really great advice, and it reminds me of this. I think it's a book, but also the book actually for me it talks about a methodology and a mindset that Muslims need to have in a non-Muslim workplace. It's called "So Good They Can't Ignore You," right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the kind of mindset that we should have. That we should be creating a product which they're not buying it from us because we're Muslims. They're buying it from us because it's such an amazing product. And I think, like
Absolutely.
you said, ihsan is within our tradition. Like we should be having that mindset to do things extremely well. So I think it's a great point, bro.
How many minutes are we in? Like you can't see on Zoom, man. I thought we would have cut us off by now.
Yeah, I think we're too many minutes in.
Okay, we can wrap it up there, inshallah, then. So, like I said at the beginning, inshallah, we will be doing these on a regular basis. There is audio and video version of it, right? So video-wise, it'll be on YouTube, Facebook, I guess. And then audio is on our podcast. Is it The Muslim CEO Show? Or anyway, if you just Google Muslim CEO Show, you'll definitely see it come up, inshallah. And usually I think we're going to like take on some kind of marketing challenges where, for example, one thing I had in mind is like, okay, if we were to make, a proper Islamic bank, but it was like a sick product, what would that look like? Yeah, that's just like an idea I had. So these kind of challenges where we kind of flex our marketing muscles and stuff. So look forward to that. Like I'll tell you to look forward to that. And
one other thing. I mean, like, so one thing is interesting is that if you guys who are watching have ideas, things you want us to address, like, maybe you've got a Muslim business and you're like, could you help me like with a name or this and that? Like, just send those kind of things into us. Like you can email us at salam@muslimceo.com, or you can comment on.
Or just put it in the comment behind.
Put it in the comments. The other thing I would say is that there's a lesson here in the fact that this podcast is unnamed, right? Because one of the things that a lot of Muslims do is that like they get like thinking and they don't take action. For us, we weren't sure what to call this yet. We've gone out to the market. We're like, okay, let's see what the Muslims like us to call this, because that's our audience. So we've had some really great suggestions. If you have an idea for a name for this whole kind of show, let us know as well. But also see the fact that even though we didn't have a name, we just said, let's do this, because taking action is always better than not taking action, right? And this is something like, even when we were starting our consultancy and our agency, we didn't even have a website and we were getting clients on board. Right, alhamdulillah. So it's that kind of mindset that take action. And so when you see what we've gone through today, if there's something that you've picked up from it, you should be going, okay, what's the action? Even if it's just one action that I can take from this podcast or this show that will actually help me move closer to my vision and to my goal and stuff. So I just wanted to say that, I mean.
You went into teacher/coach mode there.
Beautiful.
I do that a lot.
Okay. Cool. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. See you next time. Subscribe, like, share, dua, all of that.